In today's video, we have lots to talk about, including the latest speculation and trade rumors for the offseason. Today, we're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, the New York Islanders, as well as the Tampa Bay Lightning, as well as the future of Steven Stamkos, plus some trades the Lightning may make, which could involve them helping them keep Stamkos in the mix. We also got word today that Sheldon Keefe may not be able to work very long. He's already been requested permission to speak to another NHL club. We have some news on the World Championships. Of course, more playoff recaps as well. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to cover here today. Let's start with the most recent action in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Last night, we saw the New York Rangers continue their win streak. That's 7 straight playoff games to start the postseason, taking a 3-0 series lead on the Carolina Hurricanes. It was a very close game yet again. Went to overtime. Artemi Panarin scores the game-winning goal. And, well, now the Hurricanes are on the brink. Again, just like last year's Eastern Final, the Carolina Hurricanes, got swept, but it didn't. I mean, I guess if you ask Rod Brindamore, he said they didn't get swept, even though they really did. But every game, the margins are like razor thin. It's not like they're playing poorly. They're doing a lot of good things. They're just not getting that one extra bounce here or there to get them over the top. Coming back from 3-0 was almost impossible. They're not going to give up. They're going to give it everything they got, of course. I do wonder, and this is just me speculating because I haven't heard any reports to the contrary, but I do wonder, is the contract extension for Rod Brindamore going to be impacted at all by a second-round exit? Now, the Hurricanes, some people have called them comparable to the Toronto Maple Leafs, having a hard time getting over the hump, except the Maple Leafs have been having a hard time with the first round, whereas the Hurricanes have had a hard time either the second or third round. It's not the same, but sort of the same on a different level, I guess. But I thought things would be different this year. They've always seemed to struggle with that big goal. They have that one extra game breaker, and they got Jake Gensel, and he's been really good for them, and he's scored. It's not like their latest addition to try to get over that hump hasn't come through for them. It's not the case. So we'll see if they can come back from this. I mean, it's a huge mountain to climb, and the odds are greatly against them. But the Rangers, man, I tell you, the way they're playing, they've got to be the top favorite right now to win the Stanley Cup, if not, one of the top 1 or 2 for sure. So are they ever going to lose? Makes you wonder. They could have 2 consecutive sweeps to start the playoffs, which would be quite an accomplishment for them. Of course, we saw the Dallas Stars even things up with the Colorado Avalanche. Just like Game 1, Dallas got off to a good start and a big lead. Going into, I believe it was late second, early third, they had a 4-0 lead. I know where I am, it was getting really late, and I missed the third period because I fell asleep. But I did obviously woke up and caught the highlights after. But it was 4-0 Dallas when I crashed, and I woke up and they won 5-3. The Avalanche crawled all the way back, almost got it tied, not quite. Dallas hits an empty net to seal it up 5-3. So clearly, again, no lead is safe. Dallas for the second straight game built up an early lead. They blew it the first time. They almost blew it the second time. Now the series shifts to Colorado. There is word that Jonathan Durant is doing better. He's been skating more. I think that it's possible that he will play sooner than later, but we don't know that for sure. Landeskog seems to be doing a little bit more, but still seems unlikely that he's going to play. But yeah, the Avalanche are in for a tough fight against the Dallas Stars. That's going to be a long, hard-fought series. I'm not sure which direction it's going to go 1-1, but I know the Avalanche definitely need to have better starts and can't be playing from behind all the time if they're going to have a chance to win the series. So we'll see how things go now that the series shifts to their home barn. Other news today, we got some news from the World Championships. Of course, we previously had heard from the Americans on their leadership team. Today we found out that Erik Karlsson has been named captain for Team Sweden. Victor Hedman and Lucas Raymond both get the A's for the alternate captains. Victor Hedman's no surprise, longtime veteran, great leader. Lucas Raymond is a nice nod for him at a young age to be able to wear a letter for his country internationally. And after the Leafs elimination, Leafs captain John Tavares has joined Team Canada at the World Championships. They still have roster spots open, and he's gone over and was supposed to be joining the club today. The tournament for the Worlds did kick off today. Sweden did battle the U.S. and beat them today. Canada does not get underway until tomorrow. We also got word today that the Pittsburgh Penguins have signed forward Valtteri Puustinen. He gets a 2-year, one-way contract, a league minimum $775,000. For tonight's rosters in the Florida-Boston game, Sam Bennett has returned, so he's back in the lineup after missing some games. He had a collision with Brad Marchand in the first period, and Marchand was shaken up and injured on a play. I'm not sure if he's been back out because I had to stop and miss part of the game to record this video, so I'm not sure where things stand with Marchand as of right now, but I know he was shaken up and was sitting out a little bit, but we'll see if he comes back. And of course, Leon Draisaitl is questionable for tonight for the Oilers as they do battle the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, he was injured in the first game, missed, I think, the last 8 minutes or so of the second period. Coach Knobloch checked it up as saying cramping and equipment issues, but then all of a sudden he's day-to-day and questionable for tonight. It's a game-time decision, so I don't think cramping was really the issue. The Oilers just better hope it's nothing too serious, because clearly the Canucks were underestimated, and they can hang with the Oilers. So without a productive Leon Draisaitl, it's going to prove that much more difficult. So we'll see on that front how Leon does tonight if he gets into the game. Andrei Kuzmenko, current member of the Calgary Flames, former Vancouver Canuck, has changed agents. He's now going to be repped by Newport Sports. So clearly that'll have an impact possibly on his next contract. I believe he's happy in Calgary. Sometimes you see agent changes which can lead to a trade or trade request or things of that nature, but Kuzmenko didn't do a long-term contract, so it won't be long before he needs one anyway, so we'll see if what kind of impact that has, but he's got new representation, which is certainly notable. Sheldon Keefe, the recently fired head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, might not be out of work for very long, and it's not surprising. As I mentioned before, clearly Keefe had a great record and run with the Maple Leafs, good regular season record, .665 winning percentage. Playoffs, a different story, but at the same time, impressive enough that he's going to get a second chance at some point. Now, whether or not it happens right away still have to remain to be seen here, but the New Jersey Devils have requested and have received permission to speak to Keefe about their vacant head coaching role. Of course, they're not bringing back interim head coach Travis Green, since he's already secured permanent employment for the next few years with the Ottawa Senators. So, the Devils have been linked to Craig Berube. Of course, we know the vacant Toronto job now that Berube is likely being interviewed there as well. I know Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman said they believe that it's possible that Berube might be interviewed this weekend. They weren't sure. We heard comments today, of course, from the Leafs brass, which we'll talk about a little bit further after. But one of the things they did say was that they don't want to rush the job to get a new coach, but at the same time, they know there's lots of vacancies around the NHL, and there's obviously a decent amount of highly respected coaches that are available, and they want to make sure that they don't lose out on somebody who they might feel will be a great fit to these other teams that are also looking. There is competition out there, so clearly, they're going to get right after it and see who their top candidate and top choice will be. There's still some that think that Berube is going to end up being that guy, but I know there was a lot of linkages there between the Berube and the Devils too. So we'll see. Just because New Jersey wants to talk to Sheldon Keefe doesn't mean they haven't talked to a bunch of other candidates, and it doesn't mean for sure that they're going to offer him the job. So we'll see, but it's good news for him that he may not have to wait long to get other employment. Clearly, there's other teams looking. He's still got the Seattle job. There's the San Jose job. A few others around the league. So we'll see where Keefe lands, and of course who the new bench boss is for Toronto. In the rumor section of today's video, a variety of teams I want to take a look at. Let's start with Tampa Bay. The first part of this comes from the Athletics. Joe Smith, a recent article, or he did talk and interview with GM Julien Brisebois, and apparently there is progress, and they're close to being able to do a contract extension for Victor Hedman. Now, of course, Victor Hedman would be entering the final year of his deal and will be eligible for an extension. That's not going to be officially eligible until July 1st, but it doesn't mean they can't talk about it ahead of time. They can't put pen to paper to July 1, but he's already in their organization. There's nothing that stops teams and players from having those early conversations to kind of lay the groundwork for that deal to come together quickly after it's technically eligible to be signed. So he made it clear in his comments to Smith and The Athletic that they very much want to keep Hedman, that they're still, very happy with his production, even though he's a little bit older. Made it clear that the full intention here. Now, he didn't say anything like this when it came to Steven Stamkos. Look at last year at the season end when it was, possible to talk to Stamkos about an extension. They made it clear that they wanted to wait and that they had to wait and see how the team performed and wait till the end of the year. Completely different verbiage in the words chosen here by the general manager. So there's still a lot of uncertainty around Stamkos' future. And based on how Stamkos left the ice in the final game when Tampa lost out in the playoffs to the Panthers, there is a lot of talk that he certainly has his doubts that he's going to be able to go back. Even though he wants to, and to some degree the team wants to have him back too. But are they going to lowball him? We don't know. There's also reports that I've seen in the Tampa Bay Times from reporter Edward Encino, who was talking about the fact that they might look to move Anthony Cirelli. And that would just be a cap-cutting move, and which could allow them to sign Stamkos. Cirelli's a very important piece there. I mean, clearly, losing Anthony Cirelli would be a huge blow. I mean, not only is he anchor that second line, but he can play both special teams, PK and power play. Just a good two-way, hard-working center with some offensive upside. They would not have a hard time trading him should they choose to go down that road. At this point in his contract, I'm pretty sure, I'd have to double-check with Cap Friendly, but I don't think Cirelli has the protection to block a trade as of right now either. So there is that. If you take a look at some of the veterans around the team that could be moved, obviously there is a bunch of them that would need to give consent and waive their no move or no trade. But in his case, I don't believe that's necessary. So when it comes to Cirelli, though, it just seems like they've lost a lot of good pieces in the last few years because of the cap and everything. But I tell you, that one would really hurt. But at the same time, it's a good enough salary that it would free up enough money to bring back Stamkos. So as much as it hurts to lose Cirelli, if they lose Stamkos for nothing, geez, that's going to hurt even worse. But at the same time, with losing Cirelli, they would get a good return. They might be able to get a good return in form of younger, prospects that are on ELCs or, a high first round pick. I'm not sure what they would ask for, but it certainly wouldn't be a cheap acquisition for anybody. That's for certain. So but be curious to see what Tampa Bay does. By the time we get to the draft, we'll know, obviously, or at least we have a pretty good idea where things stand with Stamkos. Obviously, they don't have to sign him on July 1st, but as soon as that time comes, for one, he's no longer eligible to do an 8-year deal, which I don't think he would do anyway. So he's knocked down from 8 years down to 7, so that they lose a piece of leverage with other teams that way. And then secondly, of course, other teams can talk to him and make offers, and they can be at risk to lose him. So I don't know what's going to happen in Tampa. It's really difficult to say. But clearly, I find it surprising that they're going out of their way to get ahead of it with Hedman, but they did not do that with Stamkos. Not that I would think that they'd want to move on from Hedman. He's a huge defenseman, big part of that team. I understand why they want to. I'm just surprised they didn't do the same with Stamkos. Stamkos made it perfectly clear when training camp started how disappointed he was with the lack of talks. And then Breezeball made it clear that they weren't going to happen. There's also talk about the New York Islanders. I know Larry Brooks of the New York Post has kind of, I guess you could say, ignited some speculation, some talk around what they may do. Certainly some talk around forward Brock Nelson. Now, as I've mentioned Nelson's name a couple times in recent videos, there's a lot of reason to think that maybe Lou Lamoriello keeps Nelson in the fold. He's been very productive for them. And for a team that needs to find ways to be younger, faster, and more offensive, it would hurt to lose his goals and things he brings to the table. But at the same time, he's got 1 year left on his contract, going to be 33 years old soon. And, do you really want to extend another veteran up into his late 30s or pushing 40? That's probably not something they need. As much as you'd like the player, you don't really want to have another long-term deal on an aging player like that. He's doing really good today, but you don't want to risk getting stuck with a contract that you really don't like in a couple of years' time. So there is talk that he could be moved, especially like if you're going to make some upgrades and if you're going to have a chance to acquire a younger top offensive player, he might be a player that has to go. I mentioned as well the contract for Pajot is something that they'd probably like to move on from as well. Not necessarily saying they'd be traded together or anything of that nature, but there is a lot of talk around Brock Nelson. If you look at a team that might want to use him as a one-year rental, that would probably be your most ideal teams to look for, because it's really difficult to say if any team right now would want to do an extension immediately. I mean, he said he's not old, but he's old enough that you don't want to go too long term. If he's willing to do, maybe a 3-year deal or something like that, that's not so bad. That I can see working out. I'd be comfortable with that. But what will he want for a contract, and what's he going to be willing to take for money? If he's willing to take a bit of a discount and do a shorter term deal, maybe they can figure it out so he can stay in Long Island. But if he's, looking to cash in on his recent production and wants a little bit more security and a little bit more money, then I don't know that the Islanders are going to be able to do that. I mean, they need to make some changes this offseason, and I really hope for Patrick Waugh's sake that he influences Lou Lamoriello to make some more acquisitions and more upgrades here, because he's sat and done not a lot in the past couple of years, and it's time that roster gets a bit of a makeover. So we'll see what the future holds for Brock Nelson. And of course, in Toronto, we listened to the press conference today. I did do a video earlier today just kind of talking about all the comments and what was said by the Leafs brass and what we should maybe expect and what the takeaways were from that. Ultimately, we had MLSE president Keefe, Maple Leafs president Brendan Shanahan, and Maple Leafs GM Brad Treliving on the meeting. Pelly, of course, it was the first time he spoke since he got his new job as the president of MLSE. He made it clear that being a good team is not good enough. They want to try to be a great team. The goal is to win. He said, we're not here to sell jerseys. We're here to win a Stanley Cup. The fans want and demand championships, and we're going to do everything we can to deliver that. So he said a lot of the right things. He focused hard on chemistry and unity, which is what he used to describe the relationship between Treliving and Shanahan. I'll give the reporters kudos. They were not afraid to ask the tough questions today. One reporter even asked about Sheldon Keefe's dismissal, saying Sheldon Keefe had one series win in 5 years as head coach, and he just lost his job. Brendan Shanahan's been on the job for 8 years as president, one series win. Why is he exempt from, facing something like that? And really, I was surprised the answer from Pelly really didn't go in too deep. He kind of referenced more his, called him a champion, and obviously kind of referenced more from his playing career. But as an executive, has he really done a lot to move this team forward? I don't know that you can say that. But they did make a lot of comments to say that at the end of the day, that they've seen a lot of the patterns, the inability to score in the playoffs, and that they need to make changes, and that everything is on the table. So I have no doubt we're probably for the first time going to see some surgery to this roster like we haven't seen it before. And now for the first time we can confidently say there's a good chance that the core 4 or core 5, depending on what you want to call them and who you want to include in that conversation, likely won't return, at least not all of them. It sounds like some of those tough and hard conversations are going to be had with guys like Marner, maybe Tavares as well. Of course, they both have no move clauses, 1 year left on their contract. So clearly they've already committed to Matthews. They've already committed to Nylander. So we suspect that, Marner being the main one that can bring back a good return and free up a tremendous amount of cap space would be, prime target number 1 that they'd probably focus on, but I wouldn't rule out Tavares. And another one, as Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick talked about on his radio show after the press conference was finished, they talked about who your untouchables were, and they came out with a list that was pretty short. Nylander and Matthews, and that was it. So what about Morgan Rielly? I've seen that's kind of got the fan base riled up, and I've seen some people already out there saying, the Leafs are shopping Rielly. No, that's not the case. This is just a couple of reporters that have a lot of intel and a lot of inside info making the suggestion that he's not off the table. Doesn't mean he's being shopped. There's a big difference there. But if they come across a deal that they feel really makes the Leafs better, and if the team wants to call and acquire on a player like Riley, I think now more than ever they would actually listen. Whereas there was times in the past where they would just hang up the phone and be like, no, he's an untouchable. We're not even looking at it. That's not the case now. So clearly, Riley's been a real good player for them. He's 30 years old now, the longest tenured Leaf. Still has 6 years left at $7.5 million. So he could be a lifelong Leaf. He also, like his teammates we've talked about, has a no move. So he'd have to be talked to and agree to waive it. Where would he want to go? It's hard to say. He's a Western Canadian kid. So I'm not sure if there'd be any desire to find a home out there with one of the Western teams or not. I don't know. And will he even want to leave? Like I said, with Marner and Tavares, they can all do the same thing, and they can all absolutely refuse to do anything and say we're not going anywhere and make it hard on them. But if they think the team doesn't want them, and really, I would think that they'd be more willing to move on. But we'll see what happens. But again, Riley's a name that was talked about today, and just mention of him not being an untouchable does not mean he's being shopped. But I have to think, like I said, if there's deals to be made that makes the team better, then he could be included. But like I've said before, he's a good defenseman. To me, he's just not a real solid number one. And he's needed more help on that blue line for a long time. Yes, this team has had more grit, more, I guess, snot, as Trey Levy likes to call it. And they actually played better defensively in this playoffs than they had probably ever in the playoffs and under this regime, under this group of guys. But at the same time, for Trey Levy to say they don't necessarily need more skill, it's not completely true. You need a combination of balance of skill with those other things that he called. One of the comments he made was to do the unsexy hard things longer than the other team. And he's not wrong. Like, you do need to do that. It's a tough game in the playoffs, completely different than regular season. But it doesn't mean that you don't need skill, because he made reference that you don't need skill for those types of plays. And yes, the effort, the drive, the desire to compete, that's not necessarily something that falls under skill. That's more of a will. But they need players that have both, because you could see that, yes, the D might have been better defensively, but they don't have much back there after Riley that can move the puck. McCabe, I was impressed with his game throughout the playoffs. I think he was pretty good at both ends of the ice, but after that, there's a big drop-off. Like, some guys did better for clearing the front of the net, blocking some shots, but offensively, moving the puck, they need more. The bottom six did not produce nearly enough. They have some good players. Some will have speed. Some would have good defensive metrics, but again, not getting a lot of offense. So when your big guys don't score, you got nothing. You're doomed, and that's what happens. The space and the time dries up for them, and they've had a hard time to push through, and nobody else is coming behind them to get the job done. It should be on them, considering the amount of money they make. And the other big question that was tough that was imposed to the brass today, which was, listen, you talk a lot about chemistry and unity. When you have 4 or 5 players making that much money of your salary cap, there's going to be a huge gap between what they make and what the bulk of the rest of the team make. Is it challenging to have unity when you see the guys making, $1 million or league minimum going out there doing the dirty work, and then the star players going out there and in some cases look like they refuse to do that type of work? It can create a bit of a divide, and it can make those other players not necessarily want to do that for them. And that cohesiveness is challenging to have in that type of structure. So I do wonder if they'll have a better overall team by having a better balance of players amongst the world of income, not just what their jobs and roles are on the club. But Morgan Riley was just an interesting name that was brought up today. And like I said, I'm not saying they're shopping him, but if a deal comes along where he has to be included, I think that for the first time, they'd be very much open to it. But like Marner, like Tavares, he has to agree. So we'll see. Changes are coming, but these players are going to have a lot to say, and we'll see what happens. But certainly a bit of a learning day as far as what to expect from the Maple Leafs this afternoon. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.